Hello you guys, it's Grace, and today I am going to be talking about my spring reading wrap-up. Let's jump into the books that I finished in the last season. I only read 8 books. My goal for 2022 is to read 50 books, so I am just a little bit behind schedule, but I'm okay with it. It'll all be okay. So the first book I want to talk about is Windfall by Jennifer E. Smith. This book follows our main character, Alice, and she buys her best friend Teddy a lottery ticket for his 18th birthday, and he ends up winning the lottery, and he wins a lot of money. This book kind of explores their relationship and how it changes based on winning all of this money. Some of my favorite things about this book were the friendships. So Alice, Leo, and Teddy are kind of this trio of friends, and it explores their friendship throughout this entire book, and I loved their friendship. Alice also in this story is kind of debating whether she wants to move to California, and she feels this pull towards California, and I read this at kind of a perfect time in my life because I was hearing back from grad schools, and my top choice for grad school at that time was University of San Francisco. I've always loved California and always kind of wanted to move there, but I ended up accepting a program here in the Midwest. I also loved the slow burn romance in this story. It was perfection. Like, sometimes I get frustrated with slow burn romances because I'm just like, get to the point already. We can tell you like each other. But this one, it worked out because the conflict created that balance that created even more conflict other than them just like admitting their feelings for each other, and it was so good. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was kind of the perfect light and fluffy read to start off my spring season. Next up, I have What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. Apparently, I was just in a fluffy contemporary mood at the beginning of spring. This book just had me giggling and just in a wonderful mood the whole time I was reading it. It was so cute. This follows our main characters Arthur and Ben, and they end up just running into each other at a post office. And Arthur is just in town for the summer, and he's kind of this naive, just sweet little bean. And then we have Ben, who's a lot more pessimistic about love and kind of about the world. Then this thing happens and they lose sight of each other, and they're like, they're never gonna see each other again. But they do, and they end up reconnecting, and then it kind of follows their romance as it blossoms and their difference in personalities and all of that. And I loved it so much. And it also kind of made me think about fate, because this meeting between Arthur and Ben at the beginning at the post office was kind of what sparked all of this. And Arthur is very much like, oh yes, this has to be fate. How would we have met, and how would we have like refound each other later? And it was just a really fun exploration of that. And I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Going Bovine by Libba Bray. It was a really fun book. So I'm just gonna read you what I said about this one because I think it describes my feelings about the book perfectly. This book was thought-provoking, and it made me think about all those big questions that keep us up at night about life and death, everything between, and everything after. The writing style was both poetic and witty, and I fell in love with the characters so quickly. It almost brought me to tears a few times, and it made me laugh even more often. Basically, this book follows our main character, Cameron, and he is diagnosed with mad cow disease, and he embarks on this road trip with his best friend to try to find a cure. And there's kind of the question throughout of, is this reality or is this something that's happening in his mind due to his illness? Because it kind of fades back and forth between the hospital and this epic adventure that they're on, but it never really tells you 100% if this is reality or if it's not. The humor also was everything. I never expected to laugh this much in a book about dying. And I also really liked the road trip vibes. And then there were also some big, deep philosophical questions about the world that I just really enjoyed reading about. I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars. There were times it got a little bit slow for me, but as a whole, I really enjoyed it. I think I also unhauled the next book on my list, so I'm just going to talk about that, and that is A World Without You by Beth Revis. This one I had been looking forward to for a really long time. I bought it several years ago, and I've had it on my shelf and been really excited to read it, but with the pandemic happening, I didn't really think I was going to be in a mental state to read it because there's a character that commits suicide in the story and just a lot of coping with mental health and that kind of stuff. I wasn't in the mood for a book like that. I wanted kind of more light, fluffy books that would take me away from reality. So I finally got around to it and I was really excited, and it just really disappointed me. There were aspects of the book that I really liked, but as a whole, it just wasn't my favorite. It's about our main character, Bo, who is in this facility for kids with superpowers. Bo thinks he can travel through time. His best friend, Sophia, commits suicide, but he doesn't believe them. When they tell him that she committed suicide, he thinks that he traveled through time with her and like dropped her somewhere and left her there. So he spends the whole book basically trying to travel through time and save her. Again, it was one of those that was like, is the time travel real? Is he right that Sophia's stuck in the past? Or is this all in his head? It was a cool premise, and I thought certain parts of it were very well done. However, I found it really hard to connect to the characters. It also felt very repetitive. Probably my favorite aspect of this story was thinking about all the potential futures that our choices can make was just really interesting to me because obviously Bo believes he can time travel, so there were several scenarios where he was describing what his sister's life would look like in the future, and based on her choices, the threads of time would change and her future would change. And it kind of made me feel a little bit more relaxed about the future. There was this whole page where it just talked about how she had all of these different futures that Bo has seen, and yet none of them were bad, and none of them he could deem the right path for her. They were all just different variations of her future, and each of those futures would make her who she was. And I just thought that was kind of beautiful. As a whole, I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. The next book I have on my list that I read is The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab. This, I believe, was V.E. Schwab's first published novel, but it was interesting to see how her writing has improved from this early book in her career to her much more well-known books now. I find that such a cool thing to see with authors, their self-growth. This book follows our main character, Lexi, and eventually children in her town start disappearing, and the same night that the children start disappearing, a stranger appeared in their town. The stranger is immediately blamed for all of the disappearances because he's the first stranger that has been seen in town in years, and these two events coincided, but eventually Lexi and this stranger end up working together to solve the mystery of the disappearances of the children. And it was just really cool seeing Lexi and the stranger kind of grow and connect. I thought it was also kind of an interesting take on society, how we tend to exclude people of a different type. And I also really enjoyed this specific copy. It's a Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, so this one had a map, an interview, and then a short story, which is called The Ashbourne Boy, which was the story of the stranger in town and kind of his background. My favorite things about this were the two like old witches that live on the outskirts of town. I really liked them as characters. They were really interesting. And I loved how fierce Lexi was on her mission of protecting the things and the people that she loved. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. So this shirt actually, which I did not do on purpose, but this is from Bungo Stray Dogs, which Dazai is this guy right over here. He's one of the characters, and his character is based on this. So it's so good. I loved this book. I think this is my only 5-star read in 2022 so far. I'm gonna read the back because I have tried to explain this book to people so many times and I just never can. Portraying himself as a failure, the protagonist of Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human narrates a seemingly normal life even while he feels incapable of understanding human beings. Oba Yozo's attempts to reconcile himself to the world around him begin in early childhood, continue through high school where he becomes a clown to mask his alienation, and eventually lead to a failed suicide attempt as an adult. Without sentimentality, he records the casual cruelties of life and its fleeting moments of human connection and tenderness. So this is one of the 10 best-selling books in Japan. I just found it fascinating. I remember just flying through this book. I was not able to put it down, and I wish I annotated it because I think I would have found so many parts in this book to annotate. So I might have to reread this at some point and actually go through and annotate it. I did end up writing down a few of my favorite quotes, so I'll share those in a second because I think it just like describes the voice of this book so well. I just thought it was such a beautiful description of someone who doesn't fit in. They feel like they don't fit into society. The way I described it was, this book was stunning. The prose was beautiful. In a way, it was both rambly and succinct, and I found myself needing to pause now and then to sit with a phrase or ponder an idea. Yozo's life was tragic in the sense that there are people all over the world that struggle with the things that he did. So I wrote down 2 of my favorite quotes from this book. The cathedrals of melancholy are not necessarily demolished if one can replace the vulgar, what a messy business it is to be fallen for, by the more literary, what uneasiness lies in being loved. Then the next one is, what superficiality and what stupidity there is in trying to depict in a pretty manner things which one has thought pretty. The masters, through their subjective perceptions, created beauty out of trivialities. So there were just lots of quotes like that just really make you pause and think about things that you really wouldn't think about otherwise. Like, they seem like such trivial things. 5 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I felt ashamed not having read this because I was an English major for undergrad and now I'm going on to get my master's degree in writing. Why have I not read this book about book banning? Just the idea of censorship and not being able to expand your mind in the way that you want to. If they don't have the opportunity to read books about these things, they're never going to expand their knowledge about those topics and learn and grow as people. Y'all know the plot of this, but it was fascinating. I really enjoyed it. Just in general, the idea of an underground rebellion that loves books and is trying to protect the idea of books. It was just amazing. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was several snippets taken from one page. The magic is only in what books say, how they stitched the patches of the universe together into one garment for us. The more pores, the more truthfully recorded details of life per square inch you can get on a sheet of paper, the more literary you are. So now do you see why books are hated and feared? They show the pores in the face of life. So beautiful. I could geek out for days. I'll stop talking about that one. 4.5 stars. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm glad I finally got around to it. The final book I read in spring of 2022 is Daughters of Sparta by Claire Haywood. I also annotated the crap out of this book. There were so many thought-provoking moments in this book. It was actually the first time I've annotated a book. This book follows Nestra and Helen, daughters of Sparta. They're both kind of embarking on their own lives. It starts when they're young children, and there's just all these beautiful and sad moments throughout the book of their life, and it follows basically their whole lives while they're becoming wives and mothers, and then the war happens. I don't often enjoy books that are more about the human experience than an actual like concrete plot, but lately I've been really drawn to them, and I think this one was kind of exactly what I was in the mood for. It had some really cool feminist undertones, but it also stayed true to the time that it was set in. I'll stop blabbing about that one because I will talk in more detail about it in another video, but I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. So that's it for the books I finished in spring of this year. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, comment below what books you read over the past season, and subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified whenever I upload a new video. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!